Your mother is just a burden. She already had her life. Now it's our turn. The money should be ours. Those were my son-in-law's words. They didn't see me as a mother, just as a walking inheritance. The worst betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones we love most. Subscribe to the channel to hear my story and the stories of so many other women. No one should have to face this alone. I was standing in the hallway, just steps from the living room, when I heard his voice, cold, steady, without a hint of hesitation. My daughter stayed silent. The pause hurt more than any answer. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. The floor seemed to give way beneath me. I knew his chill. I'd seen the arrogance tucked into every gesture. But hearing those words out loud, in my own home, felt like a punch to the chest. My daughter, my blood, the little girl I carried on feverish nights, the one whose first steps I clapped for, now stood there in silence, letting a man who'd only been in our lives for a few years reduce me to a burden and a bank account. Late afternoon light softened the room. With the curtains half open, a golden strip fell across the worn rug. The TV hummed low, a background murmur, but all I could hear was his sentence echoing in my head. The money should be ours. I wasn't a mother anymore. I wasn't a person. I was an amount. My breath went shallow. I tried to pull myself together before they saw me, but it was too late. A hot tear slid down my cheek. How did we get here? When did my daughter stop being my confidant and become an accomplice to someone who saw me as a problem to solve? Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I stayed quiet. And in that silence I understood. If I didn't act, I'd be erased from my own life, still alive, but treated as if I were already gone. I remembered the first day I met him. She walked in smiling, hand in hand. Her eyes were shining. I smiled too, wanting to believe he'd make her happy. That first dinner, he was charming, praised my cooking, talked about building a solid family. I believed every word. The signs came early. Little comments about how I should rest more, let them handle my bills, give up a few responsibilities. At first, it sounded like care. Over time, I saw it for what it was, control. And now, years later, the mask had fallen. My hands shook. My whole body wouldn't obey me. I sat on the stair, trying to breathe. From the hallway, I still heard their muffled voices. He spoke. She agreed with a murmur. I heard no defense. No, don't talk about my mother like that. Her silence was the confirmation I never wanted. Some pain comes from the outside and hurts you, but the pain that comes from within your own flesh destroys you. In that moment, I realized my daughter was no longer mine. He had convinced her I was a burden. He had won, I had lost, but not forever. I stood, wiped my tears on my sleeve, and walked to my room. Each step sounded like a decision. I would not be a burden. I would not be a bank. I would not be forgotten. I didn't know how yet, but that day I began to plan. I closed my bedroom door gently, as if that small act could shield me from the cruelty still echoing through the house. I sat on the bed and faced the old mirror in the corner. The woman looking back at me was tired. Yes, but there was still a spark burning inside. Those phrases wouldn't stop ringing. She's just a burden. She already had her life. Now it's our turn. The money should be ours. They pounded like a hammer. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a problem, an obstacle, a body waiting to die so they could inherit what they never built. I closed my eyes and drifted back in time. My daughter, small, with crooked braids and skinned knees, begging me to push her higher on the swings. Higher, Mom. She'd laugh, wind in her face. I ran behind her, afraid she'd fall. She only laughed harder. I lived for that laugh. I worked, sacrificed, set aside my own dreams so she'd lack nothing. And now, that same girl who once trusted my hands let a man call me a burden. I glanced at her old room now, just a space full of echoes, faded squares where posters once hung, an empty closet. I ran my fingers across the desk where she did homework, remembering late nights explaining math, making snacks, keeping her company. It all felt far away, like it happened to someone else. For me, being a mother had always meant giving without expecting anything back. But hearing that my value boiled down to numbers, that the money should be ours, opened a canyon. My daughter no longer saw me as a mother. I was a bank, and banks don't get affection. They get emptied. I remembered an old friend, Margaret, who used to say, "Family isn't just blood, it's who stays." I never believed her. I swore blood meant love. Sitting alone in my room, I knew she'd been right. Blood can be poison. My body answered before my mind did. Sweaty palms, racing heart, a stomach in knots. Every part of me said, do something. Don't delay. Don't allow this. If I didn't choose, I would be erased while still alive. I couldn't let my daughter or her husband be responsible for me, my choices, my health, my future. I had to take back the power that never should have been theirs. I walked to the desk and opened the drawer with my important papers. I rested my fingers on the folder that held my will and my medical documents. I touched them like someone touching a hidden weapon. I whispered to myself, voice low but steady, they won't decide when or how my life ends. I will. And that's how my freedom began. The distance didn't happen overnight. It was a thin thread, tugged day after day, until the bond between us was barely there. At first, it was small things. Phone calls that used to be daily became weekly. Dinner invites faded. There was always an excuse: work, social plans, the rush of life. I tried not to sound needy, but inside I felt the gap widening. I remember one afternoon I called just to hear her voice. She picked up too quickly, like she didn't want the call to last. Are you okay? I asked. Of course, Mom. I'm just busy. We'll talk later. Okay. The call ended in under 2 minutes. I stared at the phone in my hand, heart tight. It was like holding sand. The harder I tried to keep it, the faster it slipped away. To my daughter, I wasn't a presence anymore. I was a number in an account, a living inheritance, just waiting. And he was always there, my son-in-law, hovering like a shadow. With a polite, chilly smile, he'd say, you need to let her live her life. Don't depend on her so much, Ruth. Back then, it sounded like advice. Now I know it was poison. Over time, I realized it wasn't neglect. It was manipulation. He wrapped her in the same careful phrases, always with that tone of protection. She has her own life now. Now it's our turn. You've already done your part as a mother. They sounded reasonable, brick by brick, building a wall between us. I remember a night she came home different. She sat with me at the table and said, without looking up, Mom, I think you need to rest more. Stop worrying about things that aren't really yours to handle anymore. At your age, I smiled to hide the sting, but inside something hurt. Those weren't her words. I knew the tone, the cadence, the chill. They were his. It was like he'd reached inside her and spoken with her mouth. The hardest blow came on my birthday. We always celebrated together, even if it was small. I baked a cake, set the table, put flowers in the center. I waited all day. Hours passed. No call, no visit. When night finally fell, my phone rang. Her voice was rushed. Mom, I'm sorry. Today was crazy. We'll celebrate later. Okay. Behind her, I heard his laugh, muted, almost mocking. The cake went cold on the table. I ate a slice alone, trying to swallow not just the sweetness, but the bitterness of loneliness. That night, for the first time, I felt like I had lost my daughter while she was still alive. The distance was invisible, but relentless. Every gesture, every word, every silence pushed me farther away. And the harder I tried to move closer, the more he pulled her to his side. I began to see it wasn't fatigue or busyness. It was a plan. He wanted to erase me. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought, if I do nothing, I'll be forgotten, as if I never existed. And in that moment I understood, this wasn't just a fight against ingratitude, it was a fight against erasure. I whispered to myself, almost like a promise, they won't erase me. CTA localized. Have you ever felt someone slowly push you out of your own life? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe to join women who won't be sidelined or silenced. Your voice matters here. I remember the first time something felt off. It was a regular Sunday. We were in the kitchen getting lunch ready. My daughter was slicing vegetables while he watched. Mom, you should rest more, she said softly. Let us handle lunch. I smiled. It seemed sweet. Then he added, that's right, Mrs. Ruth. You're past the stage of worrying about these things. You should enjoy life and leave the details to us. That day, I agreed. I went to the living room and sat on the couch, trying to relax. But as I listened to them in the kitchen, something sounded wrong. If she rests more, we'll have more time to organize her accounts. I heard him whisper. My daughter didn't answer, but her silence was heavy. When they brought lunch out, they were all smiles. See, resting felt good, didn't it? She said. I smiled back. Inside, something already ached. Days passed, and the comments kept coming. Mom, you don't need to worry about your bank accounts, my daughter would say. He and I can take care of it. Exactly, Mrs. Ruth, he'd add. You deserve peace. That stuff only gives you headaches. At first, it sounded like love. Who wouldn't want to share responsibilities? But soon I realized it wasn't sharing, it was replacement. One afternoon, I found them in the living room, going through my papers. What are you doing? I asked, startled. My daughter smiled, embarrassed. Nothing, Mom. We were just organizing. He, bolder, said, no need to worry. Let us handle the boring stuff. I took my papers back, forcing a smile. The tightness in my chest only grew. Then the suggestions got bigger. Mom, why don't you put the house in our names? My daughter asked one day, voice sugar-sweet. If anything happens, it'll make everything easier. Exactly, he reinforced. It's just paperwork. You won't lose anything. I stayed quiet, trying to process it. Care disguised as convenience with a different agenda underneath. I don't think that's necessary, I said. This house is mine, and it will stay that way. My daughter sighed, as if disappointed. I'm only trying to help, Mom. He squeezed her hand, a silent show of support. But his eyes cold told me, we'll get it eventually. The peak came on an ordinary evening when I got home early from the market. As I reached the door, I heard their voices from the living room. She's tired already, he said. It won't take long for her to accept that she doesn't need to handle anything. But she's my mother. My daughter answered, hesitant. She's your future, he cut in. Think about what we'll have when she finally understands she's not in charge anymore. A knot climbed into my throat. I walked in suddenly, forcing a smile. Talking about me. They exchanged a look. Of course not, Mom, my daughter said, nervous. We were just talking. That's right, he added. We only want what's best for you. But in that moment, the mask slipped. Their care wasn't love. It was calculation. And something in me began to change. The morning after I heard those words, I woke up different. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was resolve. As the smell of coffee filled the kitchen, a question hit me. How long would I let them decide for me? His sentence still echoed. Your mother is just a burden. She already had her life. Now it's our turn. The money should be ours. Then, a colder thought. If he talks like this while I'm healthy, what happens when I can't speak for myself? When I'm sick, weak, dependent? I pictured him sitting in front of doctors, making choices about my body, my care, my future. I pictured my daughter silent, letting him speak in my name. No, I wouldn't allow it. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't an early inheritance. I was still the owner of my life. I went to the drawer with my documents and laid a hand on the folder with my medical papers. It was time to change everything. I made an appointment with my doctor. The room smelled of alcohol wipes and new paper. He smiled kindly, but he saw something different in my eyes. Ruth, what brings you in today? I took a breath. I want to update my documents. I don't want my daughter or my son-in-law listed to make medical decisions for me. He looked surprised, but didn't argue. He pulled out the forms. As his pen moved, I felt a wave of relief run through me. Each signature felt like removing a brick from the prison they'd tried to build around me. Are you sure? He asked, meeting my eyes. More than ever, I said. No one else decides for me. My life is mine. I signed steady, without hesitation. The next week my daughter called. Her voice was tight. Mom, I heard you changed your medical papers. Why? I closed my eyes and heard not only her voice, but his shadow behind it. Because my life is mine. No one decides for me anymore. Silence, then a sharp sigh. You're imagining things because of him. You're being unfair. A bitter smile tugged at my mouth. Unfair is being treated like a burden. Unfair is being seen as a wallet. I'm not a bank or an obstacle. I'm a woman. She didn't answer. She hung up. They didn't want to help me, they wanted to control me. That night, I sat on the porch under a sky sprinkled with stars. The wind carried the smell of damp earth, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I had made a decision for myself. Peace came with fear, too. By cutting that rope, I was declaring war. He wouldn't sit still. She wouldn't understand. The silence between us would get louder. Even so, I closed my eyes and whispered, if it's war, so be it. This time, I fight for me. Your body, your boundaries, your choices. If you've had to reclaim your voice from controlling care, share your story below, and subscribe. This community has your back. It was a quiet afternoon. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang long, insistent, almost aggressive. My heart raced before I even opened the door. I knew who it was. When I turned the knob, there they were, my daughter, arms crossed, and him, my son-in-law, with that cold, arrogant stare. "Can we come in?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. He walked straight in. She followed, head down. I stood there for a moment, breathing deep, then closed the door and went to the living room. They were already on the couch like they still owned the space. I set the coffee pot on the table, trying to stay calm. "I'm guessing you came to talk about the paperwork," he laughed dry, humorless. "So, it's true. You actually removed us from your medical directives." "Nothing personal," I said, steady. "It was my decision." My daughter shifted, uncomfortable, in the armchair. "Mom, why did you do that? Don't you trust me?" I looked at her with tenderness and with pain. "Trust isn't the issue, honey. The issue is that I don't trust him." The air thickened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're being unfair. We've always taken care of you." "Taken care of what?" I raised my voice for the first time. "My bills, my money, my life as if I were incapable." My daughter tried to step in. "That's not it." "Then, what is it?" I asked, meeting her eyes, because I heard him. I heard him call me a burden. I heard him say the money should be yours. She went pale. He didn't flinch. He just smiled, that little crooked smile that always chilled me. "You misunderstood." "No, I understood perfectly," I said, firm, "which is why no one will make decisions for me anymore." The silence that followed was sharp. The ticking clock echoed around the room. He broke it first. "You really think you can make every decision alone? You think you'll manage?" "I don't think," I said, holding his gaze. "I know." My daughter put a hand on his arm, as if asking him to calm down. "Let's just go," she whispered, but he didn't stand. "You know what's going to happen, Mrs. Ruth," he said, low and threatening. "You'll end up alone, and when you need help, there'll be no one." I moved to the table and poured myself coffee. My hands didn't shake anymore. "I'd rather be alone than be treated like a burden." He laughed, mocking. "You have no idea what you're saying." I took a sip and answered, "I know exactly what I'm saying. And I've already started. I took you off my documents, and I'll keep removing you from everywhere you don't belong." My daughter's eyes widened. "Mom, what are you saying?" I set the cup down and looked straight at her. "I'm saying I'm not a bank, I'm not a living inheritance, and I will not be controlled." She looked like she might cry, but said nothing. He, on the other hand, jumped up, slapping his hands against his thighs. "This isn't over." "It is," I replied without moving, "because I'm done." He stared at me with hatred, then yanked my daughter by the arm. "We're leaving." She looked back at me once, as if she wanted to say something, but let herself be pulled along. The door slammed behind them. I stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding, but with a new peace inside me. They came to intimidate me. I didn't bow. Nothing satisfies the greed of those who turn family into a business. I sat on the couch, drew a long breath, and thought, this was only the first battle, but I'd already won. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. I peeked through the curtain. It was him, my son-in-law. He looked jumpy. My daughter wasn't with him. That hour I'm usually at the women's group, a weekly neighborhood meetup, but this week it had been cancelled. He knew my routine, which is why seeing him at my door set every nerve on edge. I didn't answer. My hands shook. I needed to know what he was planning. He walked along the side of the house, into the backyard. His eyes scanned everything as if measuring, as if taking stock, as if calculating a layout in his head. My body trembled, but I stood behind the curtain and watched. His phone rang. I flinched. "Hello?" "No, she doesn't suspect a thing," he said, voice low but clear. "The old woman still thinks she has some control." My blood ran cold. I leaned closer to the window, careful not to make a sound. "Of course we'll end up with the house," he went on. "It's just a matter of time. Once she's gone, everything's in our name." I stopped breathing. My legs shook so hard I nearly fell, but I kept listening. "No, don't worry. I already talked her out of changing the will," he chuckled. "The daughter believes everything I say." My throat went dry. He was laughing at my life, at my trust, at my daughter's naivety. "Yes, I'm already speaking with the attorney," he continued, "but there's no rush. She's old. She won't last much longer. The deepest cut doesn't come from strangers. It comes from your own flesh." I ran to the desk and grabbed a pen. I wrote everything down. House, inheritance, manipulation. Each word was a knife in my chest and a warning. I closed my eyes. The floor felt like it was disappearing. He talked about me the way someone talks about a chair about to break, a thing to discard. Footsteps on the porch. He tried the door, but I'd already locked it. I waited in silence until I heard his car pull away. Only then did I notice how hard I was gripping my mug, my knuckles white. My heart was screaming, "They don't love me. They're waiting for me to die." The silence afterward was deafening. I sat down, the paper shaking in my hands, the ink blurring with tears. I understood. It wasn't just contempt. It was a plan, a cold project to erase me. I wiped my face and went to the window. The sun had slipped away. The street was blue with dusk, and inside me, a flame caught. If they wanted to erase me, I would write my own story first. I slid the paper with my notes inside the old will. I whispered to myself, "Let's see who wins this battle." That morning, I spread every document across the dining table. The old blue folder held what I'd been avoiding: my previous will, insurance papers, medical records, bills. As I opened each one, the dry smell of old paper rose like a warning. His words still burned in my head. "She's old. She won't last much longer. Once she's gone, the house and the money are ours." I touched the old will. On it, everything was clear. My daughter would inherit it all, and by extension, so would he. I had signed it years ago, believing I was securing her future. Now, those pages felt like a trap I'd built with my own hands. I picked up a marker and, for the first time, wrote across the cover in big letters, "Revoked." The rough sound of ink tearing over paper felt like a door unlocking. The next afternoon, I went to my attorney, the same one I'd trusted for years. The office smelled like leather and strong coffee. He greeted me with a warm smile, but the look on my face told him this wasn't a routine visit. "Ruth, what's going on?" I set the folder on his desk. "I want to change my will. Today." His eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "More than ever," I said. "I don't want my daughter or my son-in-law named anywhere. They don't see me as a mother. To them, I'm a bank." He exhaled, adjusted his glasses, and began drafting. "Who do you want to appoint?" I looked out the window, heart thudding. For the first time, I thought of someone who had never asked for anything but my company, my old friend Margaret. "I want it in the hands of someone who respects me," I said. "Margaret will be the responsible party." He nodded and kept writing. As I signed each page, pain and relief braided together like slicing a blood tie with a clean blade. I remembered the day I wrote the old will. My daughter was young then, full of plans. I thought, at least I'll be caring for her even when I'm gone. But time told a harder truth. Caring too much can also destroy. Signature by signature, I took my freedom back. He handed me the official copy. The paper felt lighter than the air in my lungs. "It's done," he said. I stepped outside and let the sun hit my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't at anyone's mercy. Back home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was painted orange and pink. I held the documents and thought about how much had changed so quickly. My daughter would inherit nothing. My son-in-law would have no power over my body or my belongings. It hurt to accept that I'd had to cut a thread of blood. But it was also a win. Deep down, I knew there was still more to do. The house, for instance. I didn't want them twisting it against me in any way. I looked at the walls, the windows, the furniture soaked with memories, and I thought, maybe it's time to sell it all. My life won't end in defeat. It will end in justice. I woke in the middle of the night and couldn't fall back asleep. I walked the house in silence, each room lit only by moonlight slipping through the cracks. In the living room, I ran a hand over the back of the couch where I'd sat too many nights waiting for my daughter to come by. In the hallway, pale rectangles on the walls marked where her posters once hung. In the kitchen, the old wood held the scent of meals for one. I looked around and understood. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a cell. And worse, it was the trophy they expected to collect when I was gone. His words echoed again. She already had her life. Now it's our turn. The money should be ours. I smiled to myself, bitter, but certain. No, it wouldn't be theirs. If my house had value, it would light other lives, not feed their greed. The next day I met Margaret for coffee. Morning sun, the smell of warm bread, voices low around us. I told her everything: the new will, the weight of the house. "I don't want my inheritance to be a prize people fight over," I said. "I want it to be useful." She took my hand, eyes bright. "What are you thinking?" I breathed in, steady. I want to sell the house and create scholarships for girls who need a real chance. Girls with dreams, like my daughter once had but who may never have had anyone to believe in them. Margaret squeezed my hand and smiled. That's the kind of inheritance no one can squander. I left lighter. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, and love pointed where it could grow. The justice I wanted was simple. Cut the chain of greed. A few days later, my daughter called, her voice cold. I heard you're talking about selling the house. Is it true? I watched the trees sway outside the window. It's true. Silence. Then a nervous little laugh. And do what? Throw the money away? No, I said. Turn it into something that matters. Scholarships. Her voice lifted, sharp. That's insane. This house is our history. I closed my eyes and breathed. No, my daughter. This house is my prison, and it will not be the prize for anyone's greed. She muttered something I couldn't catch and hung up. I stared at the quiet phone. My heart hurt, but pride held me steady. For the first time, I was saying no without fear. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was clear, scattered with stars. I thought about the girls who might study, learn, and change their futures because of this choice. The house that soaked up my tears would become a seed of hope. A deep peace settled in. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing. If they believed money mattered more than I did, they were about to learn my value was never in these walls but in what I chose to do with them. I didn't see Margaret every day, but just knowing she was there made me feel lighter. Through her, I rediscovered something I'd almost forgotten: true friendship. One afternoon, she insisted on taking me to a special meetup. Trust me, Ruth, you'll like this. We went to a cozy cafe downtown. The air smelled like freshly baked apple pie. As we walked in, someone called my name. Ruth, is that you? I turned and saw familiar faces, two women I hadn't seen since we were young. Claire and Susan. We hugged like time had finally dropped its guard. We sat together, and between laughter and tears, we filled in decades of missing pieces. Claire talked about retirement. Susan told me about raising her kids alone. I listened and I spoke. I told them about my daughter, my son-in-law, the loneliness. You were never alone, Claire said, holding my hand. You just forgot we were still here. That cafe became a refuge. Every meetup felt like balm. We shared pain and victories, but what mattered most was belonging. One day Susan said something that stayed with me. You know, Ruth, blood family is luck. Friendship is a choice. Her words went straight through me. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't condemned to loneliness. I could build a new family, one made of truth. We laughed over old stories. Nights we danced until sunrise. Dreams that felt endless. Laughing again felt like finally coming up for air after being underwater too long. When I got home that evening, my heart felt light. The silence in the house didn't suffocate me anymore. It held echoes of friendly voices. A few days later, my daughter showed up unannounced. Her expression was hard, almost accusatory. So that's it, she asked. You've been seeing those women instead of taking care of your family. I took a breath. My family? I asked calmly. My family calls me a burden. My family says my money should be theirs. She looked away but didn't deny it. They don't know what they're saying, Mom. They do, I answered, steady. And so do I. That's why I'm not alone anymore. I have friends who remind me who I am. She didn't respond. She just left, the door slamming behind her. The worst part wasn't there greeted, was the betrayal of someone I raised with my own hands. I cried not out of despair, but out of sorrow and strength mixed together. I knew I was on the right path. The next week I met my friends again. We strolled the square, then sat by the fountain. The sound of the water was soothing. Ruth, Margaret said gently, you don't have to carry this alone. We're here. Tears slid down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. After so many years, I had found home again. I walked back, smiling, until I saw the front gate slightly open. My stomach dropped. Someone had been there. I stepped inside slowly, heart racing. The silence felt different, like the house had held its breath. The war wasn't over yet. Sunday morning, I sat in front of my old computer. My fingers trembled as I opened the real estate site. Each click felt like a hammer blow against the chains that held me. I wrote the description carefully. 3 bedrooms, wide backyard, bright living room. No mention of memories, of hurts, of silences. Just facts. I uploaded the photos, checked everything one last time, and pressed publish. For a few seconds the screen went blank. Then the listing appeared. House for sale. I closed my eyes and breathed. My decision had finally taken shape in the world. In the kitchen, the coffee maker sounded louder than usual, like the house itself had heard me. For the first time in years, I felt I was steering my own life. By late afternoon, my daughter showed up unannounced, hard steps, phone in hand. "Is this real?" she asked, holding up the screen with my listing. "You put the house up for sale." "I did, Mom. How could you?" "This house is our history." "No," I said softly. "This house is my story. And my story won't be anyone's prize for greed." Silence pressed in. Her eyes filled, but anger won. "He was right, you've lost it." My heart cracked, but my voice stayed steady. "Maybe to you it's madness. To me, it's freedom." She left, the door slamming. 2 days later the phone rang. It was him. His tone was acid. "You think you can just sell this house? You won't. It's already in motion," I said. He left cold. "This house is ours. It always has been." "It never was yours," I replied. "It was mine from the start, and soon it will belong to someone else, for another purpose." "You'll regret this," he hissed, and hung up. I stared at the quiet phone. Instead of fear, a strange calm settled in. They were panicking because, for the first time, they weren't in control. That night I walked through the rooms, touching walls, doors, the stair rail. It wasn't a prison anymore. Every corner was a goodbye. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought of the girls who might study because of this sale. The house that absorbed my tears would become a seed of hope. A single tear slid down, but it wasn't pen, it was gratitude for courage found. My revenge was simple: leave them nothing. And I thought, with certainty, the farewell is closer than ever. Tuesday morning, the phone rang early. The realtor's number lit up the screen. My heart picked up before I even answered. "Mrs. Ruth, I've got great news. We received an offer on your house." The pen slipped from my fingers. I sat at the kitchen table and tried to breathe. "An offer?" "Yes. The family that toured over the weekend loved it. They're ready to move quickly." I closed my eyes and let the words sink in. It was real now, no longer just a listing on a website. The future was knocking. I grabbed paper and wrote down every detail: price, contingencies, timeline. My hands shook, but each letter landed steady. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet. I looked at the notes on the table and felt a wave rise up, part fear, part joy. The house was about to stop being a prison and become a bridge. By late afternoon, my daughter arrived without calling, face flushed, eyes bright with anger. "Tell me this isn't true. You can't sell the house." I breathed in. "It's true, and we already have the first offer." She gripped my hands hard. "Please don't do this. This house is all we have." I looked at her with lavand grief. "This house is what I've carried alone. To you, it's inheritance. To me, it's a cell." Her voice sharpened. "You'll regret this." She let go and stormed out. That night the phone rang again. Him. His voice poured like poison through the line. "You've finally lost it. You're throwing away what belongs to the family." "The house has always been mine," I said. "Never yours. You know what'll happen." He laughed. "When you're all alone, you'll beg to have us back." I held the phone, steady. I'd rather choose solitude than live as a prisoner. He shouted something, but I hung up before he could finish. I stood in the quiet, heart pounding, but under it, a new kind of strength. For the first time, he couldn't move me. No screaming, no scenes. My revenge was the calm of closed doors. Later, I walked through the rooms in silence. Living room, kitchen, hallway. I touched the walls like saying goodbye. The offer was in writing. Their fury couldn't change that. On the porch, under a sky dusted with stars, I thought of the scholarships that would grow from this sale, girls whose futures would open because I refused to be counted like cash. I whispered to myself, "This is my victory," and deep down I knew the fight wasn't over. But I didn't fear it anymore. I woke before sunrise. The city was still asleep, but I was already at the window, heart thudding as if it knew this would be the most important day of my life. I brewed strong coffee, put on my best navy dress, and pinned my hair carefully. In the mirror I saw timelines and shadows, but I also saw resolve. I was ready. At the realtor's office, he greeted me with a cordial smile. "Mrs. Ruth, today's the day. Are you prepared?" I nodded and sat at the table where the papers were neatly arranged. The air smelled like fresh ink and new paper. I picked up the pen and took a deep breath. "Here's the contract," he said, sliding the pages toward me. I just need your signature. My heart raced. I looked over the lines and thought of every lonely night in that house, every tear that seeped into its walls. It's time to turn pain into freedom. I signed the first page. The door burst open. My daughter rushed in, eyes red, followed by him. The realtor shot to his feet. "Mom, please, don't do this," she cried, grabbing my hand. "That house is all we have." I held her gaze, tender and unflinching. "It's everything you want. To me, it means nothing now." He stepped closer, voice dripping venom. "You can't sell it. That house belongs to the family." I breathed, steady. "That house is mine. My fight, my sweat, my life. And now, it's my goodbye." The realtor started to speak, but I lifted a hand. No more arguments. I signed the second page, ignoring their fury. My daughter cried. He barked threats. I didn't move. "You think I'm just a burden," I said, looking him in the eye. "You think my worth is what I own." He sneered. "Exactly. Without the house, without the money, you're nothing." The words pierced and then passed right through me. A different strength rose. "You're wrong. Without you, I'm free." I picked up the pen and signed the last page. The scratch of the tip on paper sounded like thunder, like a final period after years of being silenced. The quietest revenge is living in peace when they expected to see you broken. I set the pen down and stood. The sale is done. From today on, my life is mine. My daughter sobbed softly, but I didn't embrace her. I no longer belonged to that pain. I walked out with my copy of the contract. Afternoon sun warmed my face. I closed my eyes and inhaled. The house wasn't mine anymore. Because of that, I finally belonged to myself. I walked down the street with steady steps. For the first time in so long, I wasn't afraid of the future. I felt light. That day, I stopped being a prisoner of my own home, of ingratitude, of their greed's shadow. I looked up at the clear sky and whispered to myself, the best is still ahead. The morning after the closing, I woke early. My suitcase was already packed: clothes, a few books, old photographs I chose to keep. Everything else would stay behind. The real estate office arranged a car to take me to the bus station. On the ride, I watched the city slip past the window like a long goodbye. Every street held a memory, but none of them could hold me anymore. I bought a ticket to a small town I'd always dreamed of living in. As the bus rolled through miles of trees and open fields, my heartbeat slowed. The air felt cleaner with every mile that carried me not just away from a house but toward myself. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm coming back to me." When I stepped off the bus, the smell of damp earth welcomed me. The town was quiet: stone, sidewalks, simple houses, a rhythm that didn't rush. The local agent drove me to a little white cottage, wood porch, a garden wild with flowers, birdsong threading the air. "It's all yours, Mrs. Ruth," he said, placing the keys in my hand. I held them tight. I opened the door slowly, like unwrapping a long-awaited gift. The house smelled of fresh wood and peace. I walked through small, sunlit rooms that felt like an embrace. I realized I'd never wanted luxury. I wanted calm. I wanted silence. I wanted a beginning. All afternoon, I settled in: books on a shelf, photos on a side table, clothes in a narrow wardrobe. Each object found its place, not just in the cottage, but in the new life I was shaping. In the kitchen, I brewed fresh coffee. I sat on the porch and watched the garden sway. Birds called to one another as if announcing my arrival. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I am not an inheritance, not a burden, not a bank. Today I am simply me." Tears came, but they were different now. Not grief, release. That night, I lay in a new bed with the window open. Crickets stitched their song through the dark, and the air smelled cool and green. I felt a freedom I couldn't remember ever feeling. Here, their money doesn't speak. Here, I am free. And still, I knew the past doesn't erase itself. My daughter and her husband might try to find me. They might try to pull me back. But for once, the thought didn't scare me. The future was calling, and I was finally ready to answer. Life in the cottage found its rhythm. I woke early, brewed coffee, watered the flowers. Each morning the sun seemed to rise a little closer, as if it chose my porch first. One of those mornings, someone knocked. At the door stood a small woman with gray hair in a neat bun, holding a basket of fresh vegetables. "I'm Mrs. Turner." On the corner, she smiled. "Welcome to the neighborhood." I thanked her, surprised. She insisted I come to the Saturday market in the town square. You'll love it. Everyone knows everyone there. On Saturday, I wore a simple dress and walked to the plaza. Warm bread, ripe fruit, and flowers scented the air. Kids darted between stalls. Vendors called out specials like old friends. A wave of warmth rolled through Misempta I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I thought, I can grow roots here. At the market, I met the baker, who handed me a slice of cake just to try, the florist, who tucked a small bouquet of daisies into my bag, and the local teacher, who asked if I'd heard about the new scholarships being set up thanks to an anonymous donor. I only smiled. I didn't need to say a word. Hearing the hope in his voice was enough. As I moved through the stalls, children came up to me asking my name, telling me I looked like someone's grandma. I laughed, a sound that felt new and familiar all at once. Every face told me the same thing. I wasn't invisible here. There was life beyond those walls that kept me small. I walked home with bags full of fruit, flowers, and belonging. Days later, a note arrived from the school. The teacher wondered if I could help a group of girls preparing for a project fair. They need someone to tell stories, she said when we met, eyes bright with hope. I hesitated, then said yes. In the small community room, a dozen eager eyes watched me, notebooks in hand, dreams bigger than their bodies. I sat in the circle and talked about courage, choices, and how no one gets to call you less and be right about it. They listened in a hush, some of them scribbling phrases I didn't even realize I'd said. At the end, one girl hugged me. I want to be strong like you. Tears burned and softened at once. There it was, the living proof of my decision. Not only scholarships, but seeds planted in young hearts. Real inheritance isn't money. It's courage that multiplies. That night I sat on the porch with my new flowers, the laughter of children drifting from down the street. I thought about the turn my life had taken, once called a burden, now part of a circle that held me up. I opened my journal and wrote, "Here, I'm seen. Here, I'm heard. Here, I belong." I closed the notebook and smiled. Then my phone rang. I stood slowly, heart picking up. I answered, only silence on the other end. And I understood. The fight wasn't over yet. The ring of the phone still echoed in my mind. The silence on the line, heavy, deliberate, felt more threatening than any words, but this time, I didn't shake. I set the phone down and said out loud, steady as a vow, "You don't control me anymore." It wasn't for them. It was for me. Proof that the break was real. I stepped onto the porch and let the cool wind touch my face. The full moon lit the cottage garden. I realized I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was living in the present. There, in that hush stitched with cricket song, I understood. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the certainty of chosen boundaries. The days that followed were full of small reminders that I truly had a home now. I helped Mrs. Turner plant flowers in the community garden. I watched kids play with the toys I'd donated to the local school. I said yes to simple dinners that ended in laughter. Margaret, Claire, and Susan visited often. The cottage filled with voices, memories, and plans. There was no luxury, but there was belonging. And each time I saw the girls studying, I remembered, my sacrifice had turned into futures. My money wouldn't feed greed. It would grow hope. I smiled, realizing my life had finally bloomed where pain once lived. Sometimes I still thought of my daughter. I wondered if she would find the courage to come back, to apologize, to walk away from him. The phone stayed silent. It wasn't pain anymore. It was acceptance. Her path was hers. I couldn't carry choices that weren't mine. In my journal I wrote, "Motherhood taught me to give. Life taught me to let go. Today I release what wounds me and hold what heals me." Tears came clean, light hairs of freedom. One warm Saturday morning, I brewed coffee and sat on the porch. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the oven, soft and sweet. It was my birthday. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up waiting for my daughter's call. I didn't wait for a rushed bouquet or an obligatory text. I woke up with myself, and that was enough. In the distance, I heard voices, laughter, and quick footsteps on the dirt path. I looked up to see Margaret at the gate with flowers, Claire and Susan behind her with a cake and small, ribboned packages. A few neighborhood kids ran along, holding tiny wildflower bouquets. "Happy birthday, Ruth," they shouted, voices tumbling over each other like music. I froze, stunned, tears rising before I even stood. Margaret reached me first and wrapped me in a hug. "You thought we'd forget," she laughed. Today we celebrate you because you deserve it. The children pressed flowers and hand-drawn pictures into my hands. White cottage, bright garden, big hearts with wobbly letters. We love you. Warmth flooded my chest, like each gift erased a year of silence. Claire set the cake on the porch table. We made it together, just like old times. She winked. Susan opened a small package and handed me a hand-embroidered handkerchief. Keep it in your pocket so you'll remember you're never alone again. I cried freely, hugging each of them, kissing the children's cheeks. Thank you, I managed. You have no idea what this means. Margaret held my hands and looked straight into me. We do, Ruth. We know exactly. We sat together on the porch. The kids sang happy birthday off-key and perfect. The cake tasted like childhood and second chances. Flowers on the table, simple gifts, laughter spilling into the garden. Everything I lost in a blood family, I found herein a true one. I lifted my coffee cup and said, smiling from somewhere deep, this is my home. Here I am free. Here I am loved. Applause, grins, a breeze that felt like the world agreeing. In that moment I knew with certainty, my story wasn't about loss. It was about rebirth. That birthday, instead of mourning who didn't show up, I celebrated those who did. I am not a burden. I am not a bank. I am not an inheritance. I am Ruth. I am free. Were they just trying to help, or was it greed in disguise? Tell me what you think in the comments. Like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.